Hey everybody, I'm out for my evening stroll in the neighborhood where I'm staying, and I don't know if y'all can hear all the cicadas in the trees. I love all the noise in nature here. It's amazing. It's beautiful. And all the trees are just like, the trunks are just filled with ivy growing up. I don't know if you can see behind me, this one here, right there. I don't know, it's just stunning when you come from Lubbock, Texas, that is really dry, super dusty, very deserty. And so I don't know, I'm out for an evening stroll, and I just really feel like God has been pressing me to share some videos on Facebook. I know my posts can be lengthy. I really probably should start a blog at some point. I really dream of maybe writing a book with my story, or even going around the world and sharing my story at some point. Because these last, and I'm going to get emotional on these videos, so just be forewarned. My story is one that only me and God can fully understand these last 8+ months. But He's done some incredible miracles in my life, and it's so hard for me to even know how to say all of this, how to even begin this. But I think that we forget that God is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. That the same God who worked miracles in the Bible that we read about, or, in all these faraway countries that we hear about, and we think, does He even do any of these things here, right where we live anymore? And I'm here to tell you that He does. And I believe that I'm walking proof of that. If I say anything in these videos that may sound like poor pity me, please know that I don't pity myself. God doesn't pity me. He loves me. He has a lot of compassion. His compassion is unending. His mercy and His grace are astounding, but He doesn't pity me. He loves me enough to not pity me, and so that's why He's allowed me to suffer so intensely over the last 8+ months. As much as I've begged Him to take me home, to end the pain, to end my suffering, He's left me in that for such a time as this. And while my body is healing, I'm still in a lot of pain. But through my suffering, God has allowed pain, which has taught me to let go of control, which has brought me into this place of trust that's welled up this passion, that now has me in this place of hope. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for but not yet seen, and I'm still hoping for healing from this pain that I've been in. I don't believe I'm in North Carolina to go home the person that I was, and I'm going to share with you how God brought me here, but I'm still waiting for the abundant life. Yes, we can live the abundant life as we suffer, and God's teaching me how to do that here in North Carolina as I'm healing. He's teaching me how to live again. But I believe that abundant life that He calls us to is purpose. It's our purpose. And so that's the piece that I'm still waiting for, although I feel like He is beginning to stir me and beginning to prepare me. I almost feel like I've kind of been in the promised land, if you will, and yet in the wilderness all at the same time as He's preparing me for my ministry. And I don't know what it is yet, but there was a post that I put out on Facebook that I was telling you guys that I really wanted to try to start unpacking the miracles that God performed to bring me to North Carolina, and yet I try to think about typing it up, and I get overwhelmed and haven't a clue how to even unpack what He's done. And so I've been feeling pressed to just share some videos with you guys. I think that videos are a little bit more powerful than just reading words. So anyway, on November 24th, 2016, is when I officially was placed in this intense pit of suffering. In April of 2016, I got mono, which seemed to really stir up my Lyme. And I shouldn't say my Lyme, the Lyme, because I have every intention of nailing this thing back down to hell where it belongs. But it really started up, and I started getting really sick. In April with the mono. I recovered about 8 weeks later, and by August I was beginning to really spiral downward. Started having some really crazy symptoms that scared me. And then by October I knew something was really wrong. Then by November, and for whatever reason, it just boom hit me the night of Thanksgiving. After I ate, I was up till 5 in the morning. I couldn't breathe. It was like my food was just sitting here. It wouldn't digest. It was terrible, and it never stopped. And I got worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And I tried to control the situation by going into fix-it mode, because I know a lot about health and wellness, but this time I couldn't fix it, and neither could anybody else. And it didn't matter who I went to, I got worse and worse and worse and worse. And I will be the first to tell you that yes, my emotions probably have a big piece to do with this, and yet I think that there are unanswered questions to why this suffering that I'll never know, other than the fact that, God allows people to suffer for a greater purpose. And I believe that ultimately my pain has created a passion for a purpose, for a great purpose, for God's kingdom and for His glory. And I don't know exactly what it is yet. That's okay. I'm not in that place to know yet. So anyway, I'll leave out all the details because it can get really lengthy. But just know I went to doctor after doctor, holistic doctors after doctor, and nobody could help me. And I grew worse and worse and worse. And the pain has been all in here, all the way around. I feel like I have a belt that is as tight can be. I often have difficulty breathing. My nerves have been affected. I don't know, it's a mess. So anyway, November was when all this happened. And I would say in March, the Lord really started speaking to me about the woman in the gospel in Luke. I think she may be in another gospel as well, but how she had bled for 12 years and sought out every physician, spent all that she had, and grew worse and worse and worse and worse. And I know that God was speaking this to me, because it was at that point that I started sharing this with my mom and my husband, and it clearly was lining up with my story as I was growing worse and worse and worse, and spending loads of money, and nobody could help me, and everybody was scratching their head, and people were blaming me and telling me it was all my fault. And I knew God was speaking to me, and it took faith like you can't understand. And maybe in God's kingdom it was the size of a mustard seed, and that's enough. And I even remember begging Him, God, just let my faith be that of a mustard seed, that You would give me such faith and such trust that I will stop going and looking for help, and I will stop trying to fix and stop trying to control something that I can't fix, and I'm going to give it all to You. And it was in April that I finally surrendered that, and that was when He really began speaking to me, trust the Lord with all of your heart, lean not into your own understanding. And verse 6 after that says, submit unto Him all your ways, I'm butchering it, and He will show you which path to take. And it dawned on me just recently by God showing me that You submitted all your ways to Me, and I have shown you which path to take. Trust Me. So I remember telling my mom and my husband, I have had to sleep on the couch at my home because it is better support than our bed because of the pain. I needed to be lifted some. And I spent hours upon hours upon hours on my couch praying. And I told God, I said, Lord, I seek after you with all my heart, and I know that your word says that when I do that, that I will find you. And so you have to be faithful to what you say. And I held him to that. He's God, but I, as his child, can hold him to what he says in his word. And I told him that. And so, indeed, I began finding him. And I often get irritated inside, and I shouldn't, but I do, with people who post Jeremiah 29:11, and they take it out of context, and they only hone in on this piece that God has this great future and this great hope and this great plan for us. And he does, guys, he does. In Christ, oh my goodness, our future and our hope being with him is the ultimate. It's the ultimate of the ultimate. But it's taken out of context so much today. And we throw it out there, and we just think that God has this great plan for everyone, and there's not going to be any suffering and blah, blah, blah. And we stick it out there and sit on it. And then we wonder, gosh, Lord, what about this verse? And what follows it is the peace. It's the meat. It's what we forget. Come to me and pray to me, and you will find me when you seek me with all of your heart. I will be found by you, declares the Lord. When you seek me with all of your heart, you will find me. That's what he says. And he showed me, he said, that's what you've been doing. And because of that, I have been found by him. And I can trust him that my future and my hope is going to be good. And it's something that he's preparing for me, even though I don't fully understand it. And he's been showing me over and over and over that I'm going to get through this. And yet here I am still in pain, and it's not breaking. And yes, I'm feeling more energy, and praise be to God. And there's things that are changing with my health. But this pain is the one. So painful. So anyway, I laid on the couch for hours upon hours upon hours, praying and seeking and trusting. And in May, I had a friend private message me, and he said that he was reading from a passage in Deuteronomy, and it was about God leading the people into the promised land, and they did not have to fear because he was going to fight for them. All they had to do was walk in. And this friend said, I don't normally send messages out to people, but I was praying for you and your family for the first time in a while, and you came to mind when I was reading this passage, and I feel like I'm supposed to send it to you. This is on May 11th. And I remembered after I read it that was one of the first passages that God led me to when this whole crazy thing started. And I remember being comforted by it. And of course my flesh is always in the way, though. Oh, did I make that up? Am I over spiritualizing this? Is this really what God's saying to me? And it was like he confirmed that through my friend. I had no idea what was coming, but I kept praying, and I kept praying, and I kept praying, and I stopped looking, I stopped researching. I'm like, God, if there's something out there that can help me, if you are not going to instantly heal me, you're showing me this bleeding woman, you instantly healed her, here I am, I'm pressing into you. If I could even just touch the thread of your robe, I know that I would be healed. But if that's not what you're wanting to do, if there's something out there, then you're going to have to orchestrate it, because I am not doing anything else. But I know that I'm going to die. I know that I can't live like this long term if you don't come to my rescue. And so May 11th is when the message came from the friend. And on May 13th, 2 days later, I got an email from 2 people that I follow, Chris Wart, Chris Beat Cancer, and The Truth About Cancer, because I love researching, I love learning. And there's been times where I've been very concerned that I had cancer. And so I got this email from these two places, same email, about Green Smoothie Girl. And she was having a 26-day detox, felt very drawn to it, did a lot of research, prayed, because I'm like, Lord, I can't go down one more dead-end road. You have to show me if this is what I'm supposed to do. And I felt drawn to it, and I ordered the detox, and on May 19th, I began day 1 of the 26-day detox. This detox is phenomenal. It's amazing, but because of my stomach issues, it tore me up. But it was still my answer, because on May 19th, when I started, I was super excited, and we were put into a support group on Facebook, and we had an admin who answered questions and helped run everything. And doing what I love to do, I would post pictures of me eating some of the foods on this detox, and really trying to encourage just the other detoxers on there, and the admin Helen Katie Blair. And I really seemed to be connecting through comments. And on May 23rd, she sent me a private message, and she said something like, "Hello, my sister in Christ." And I was like, "Well, hello there, my friend." And we started talking, and she said something like, "I feel that the Lord is preparing you for ministry, or are you and your husband in ministry?" And she just asked about my story, and had no clue how sick I was, how much pain I had been in. And she ended up sending me the most beautiful typed out prayer. It was so beautiful that I sent it to my mom and my husband, because I was floored. It was so not of this world. And we just kept talking back and forth, and she has a holistic guy that she sees, and she just kept feeling like, "I think you may need to come see this guy." And so I prayed, and I'm like, "I'm not budging, Lord, unless this is something that I'm supposed to do. I'm not budging." So I prayed, and I waited, and I prayed, and I waited. And about 13 days into the detox, I got so much worse. So the detox made me worse, not because it's not good. I highly recommend it, but it wasn't good for me because of where my system in this area is. And so I had to quit, but I kept in touch with some of the detoxers and still totally support it. But me and Helen really began developing a relationship privately. And one thing led to another, and she had gone in to see Dr. Song. Hi, Dr. Song. And he asked her how she was doing. She said, "My heart is so burdened for my friend, a couple of my friends." She mentioned one of her other friends, and then also mentioned me. And I don't know exactly what she told him, but he said something like, "Why don't you have her send me her labs? Let me look through them." So I was like, "Lord, that's an open door, so that's easy to do." So I gathered all my labs, and he looked at them, and he was able to read them in a way that nobody has been able to read my labs, and it was pretty mind-blowing, and a lot of answers to why I was so sick, which was wonderful and yet overwhelming at the same time. And so he emailed me, and he said, "I'd love to offer you help if you feel like this is what you're supposed to do. You let me know." So I prayed, and I prayed, and I prayed, and I felt like I was supposed to take the next step. And so I asked what I was supposed to do, and he wanted some specific tests run. And so I'm like, "Okay, Lord, this is a big step because this is costly." The money came. So I took that step. The door is wide open. All I had to do was walk through. Really began feeling that I was supposed to be treated by him. And of course knew, the finances. We all know holistic treatment's just not cheap, but it's effective. But I also had been down this road, and so I'm like, "Lord, can't go down this road. If this is not of you, And I prayed and I prayed and I prayed, and the money came. The money came. And so I began throwing out fleece prayers, and none of them were sinful, but I had to know that I was following the Lord and not any more paths of my own, not anything that had to do with my own understanding, that this was all God. And so I laid on the couch some more, and I prayed and I prayed and I prayed, and I began feeling God burdening me to pray that my husband would have peace that surpassed all understanding, that was a divine peace, that was not a peace because I was pressuring him or because I just was trying to pull it out of him. It had to come from the Lord. So I asked my oldest daughter to pray, and I asked my mom and my brother and his wife to pray, but I wouldn't even tell him what the fleece was. I just said, I have a fleece prayer. Please trust me. It's not sinful. I'm throwing it out. You guys need to pray. And I said, I'll let you know when it's answered. And so a couple weeks went by. I told my mom, keep praying. The fleece prayer hasn't been answered yet. And I remember the day that my husband came to me. He said, I just want you to know that my peace is growing. Have peace about this. And so I was like, okay, that's the next door. And I kept praying, because then it was like I needed a place to stay. Didn't know where I was going to stay. I knew that Helen's house was a possibility, but not a probability at this point, due to some circumstances. And God was pressing me to pray for a possible house sitting job. I didn't even say anything to Helen. I just said, okay, I have another fleece prayer, guys. You all pray. And within, I don't know, a week or two after I started praying that, Helen messaged. She said, would you be interested in a house sitting job? I was like, no way. Because, guys, I can't tell you how trembling inside I was that I would follow a wrong path again. But God knew. He knew that I was seeking him and pursuing him with all of my heart. And I said, Helen, I said, God had really been pressing me to pray that there would be a house sitting job that would open up. And so she emailed the woman back who had emailed her, seeing if she knew anybody who would potentially want a house sit while they're out of town. And my story is a little strange, so of course, totally understandable. The woman that needed a house sitter was kind of like, this is weird. So I think maybe a couple weeks went by, and I finally messaged the woman. Hi, Lisa. And we set up a time to talk on the phone, and I could tell it was still weird for her, but the last thing I remember the Lord telling me to say to her was, if you and your husband don't feel peace about this, and you decide that you don't want me to house sit, there are no hard feelings, because the story is weird, and I fully understand. Barely knew Helen, just knew her from talking through private message and sometimes on the phone. There's a lot of crazy people out there, so who knew if I was legit or not? And so she said, oh, okay, well, I'm going to talk to my husband and we'll pray. And I think it was another week and a half or a week before I heard from her, and she sent me a message and she said, we would love to open our house up to you. And I was like, God, another open door. It's emotional talking about it because it's just so miraculous, you guys. But my faith was still weak. And I had one more burden that God put on my heart. And it was that God would bring a camper or a tent. I told Helen, I said, I don't care if I have to stay in a tent in your backyard. If that's what I'm supposed to do, if this is God's will, I'm willing to do and stay in whatever. And so they began looking for campers, and I said I don't want anybody buying anything because I can't afford one at all. I would never want y'all to buy one. For me, I'm really good with a piece of junk, staying in a tent, whatever. So they kind of looked around for other places for me to stay, and nothing was lining up. But I said, man, Helen, God is pressing me that we need to pray for a camper. We need to pray for a camper. And so it would seem like there were little bites, and we'd kind of get excited and it would flop. And I'm like, God, if this is your will, you're going to bring something. And I prayed and I prayed and we prayed, and my husband's faith was building at this point. And on July 3rd, Helen called and she said, Tracy, you're not going to believe what God has done. We asked for a camper and he's given us a mansion camper. And she had sent me an email with pictures, and I was floored, totally floored. And I was like, God, this is exactly where you're taking me. And by this time, after I told my husband and showed him these pictures and what God had done, and he knew all I did was lay on that couch praying, he's like, I know you're supposed to go there. And that was what I needed to hear. That was the final door for me, was that my husband said, you're getting on that plane and you're going out there, because this stuff does not happen unless God's on the move. Whew. And the really cool thing is that the time frame begins lining up, and the family who's letting me use their camper needed to stay in it because they're moving from New York back to North Carolina. Hi, Cindy. And it's during the time that I'm going to be house sitting. And so if that's not mind-blowing, I don't know what is, guys. If what I'm sharing with you is not of God, then oh, ye of little faith, right? Oh, ye of little faith. Even after all my fleece prayers were answered above and beyond anything that I could ask or imagine, anything I could ask or imagine, my faith was still shaky. And yet I believe it was still at least the size of a mustard seed. I continued to pray that God would shut the door if I was still walking down the wrong path, because I wanted His will so much. But I was so afraid of missing it, that if I somehow had missed it, even after everything that He had done, that He would shut the door. And I believe it was a few nights before I was supposed to come out here, and God took me to, I believe it's in 2 Kings, about Elisha asking God to open his servant's eyes to see the heavenly host around him. And it was like God opened my eyes and He said, my heavenly host is all around you. This battle belongs to the Lord. And I shared it with my family that night. And we all knew that this was God's promised land for me, for my family, for us. And it took me back to May 11th, my friend who messaged me about walking into the promised land and not being afraid that God was fighting for me. That even as I began packing 2 nights before I came, I had to pack things in faith. Some things that I still can't wear. This sounds so crazy, but I can't wear a bra, guys. I'm still waiting for that one. I can't wear it because of the pain. But I know that God brought me out here. Packed my Chacos in faith, and I got to wear them a few nights ago on a hike. So anyway, back up. I began packing, and I still was praying, God, if I've missed it, shut the door, shut the door. And some of these things that I was packing in faith would sit by my suitcase for hours before I could gain the courage to stick them in my bag. And God kept saying, I'm fighting for you. I've heard you cry. Put them in the bag. And so in faith I did, crying and trembling. Sounds crazy, but that's how hard it is, guys. Whew. Told you I was going to get emotional. So July 11th was the morning that I was to fly to North Carolina. I had to say goodbye to my family. And even walking through those doors, I'm like, God, if this is not the path that you have for me, shut the door. And we walk into the airport, and we're in line to check in my luggage. And the Lord opened my eyes, and he said, my heavenly host is all around you. And Jesus said, I'm right here with you, and I'm not going to leave you. And it was so audible to me. And I had such an ability in my spirit to see the heavenly host around me that I leaned into my husband with tears, and I said, his heavenly host is all around me. And I'm getting on my plane in faith, even with tears coming down my face. And I did. And here I am in North Carolina, almost a month. And the very first night that I got here, the very first day that I got here, it was like God put this spirit in me to live. And it reminded me of one of the very first things that the Lord was sharing with me when all of this pit of suffering started. And he said, go to Ezekiel, to the valley of dry bones, and your bones have been scattered all over the valley, and they're dry. And I am going to breathe life into your dry bones, spirit, soul, and body. But I had to start with my spirit. And then I had to start with breaking me of control with my soul to go, Lord, this is all yours. I can't do anything. And turning away from my own understanding that is dark and ugly and scary, and these monster shadows of fear on the wall disguising themselves as monsters, and they're just these little bitty rodents that you could just squash, but also trying to fix something that was too